Muito obrigada pela presença de vocês. Muito obrigada, Anri Sala, por estar aqui com a gente hoje. Também queria agradecer muito a toda a equipe que trabalhou nessa exposição, a equipe do estúdio do Anri Sala e a equipe do IMS, que trabalhou por mais de um ano aí com muito afinco para a gente estar aqui hoje. E queria também dizer que essa exposição faz parte de um projeto nosso aqui no IMS de trazer para o Brasil artistas internacionais que já têm um trabalho bastante consolidado, né, e conhecido, reconhecido. E a ideia é sempre não exatamente fazer uma retrospectiva, porque são artistas ainda em plena, né, atividade, enfim, com muita coisa por vir, mas sim juntar um número significativo de obras para permitir que o público brasileiro tenha contato e que possa aprofundar o seu contato com essas obras e usufruir melhor delas, porque geralmente a gente vê uma coisa aqui, outra ali. Então, faz uns 4 anos já que a gente vem tentando realizar essas exposições. Esse caso, ele é, mais uma vez, ele é muito especial para todos nós aqui do IMS e foi um desafio, mas algo que nos alegrou muito também, porque quando a gente convidou a Anri Sala para vir trabalhar aqui, né, fazer essa exposição, e ele veio ano passado, fez uma visita, e o ponto de partida era pensar como ocupar essa casa, né? Nessa exposição, mais uma vez, a gente tem a Casa da Gávea, que é um espaço nada neutro, um espaço de exposição difícil, muito lindo, muito agradável em vários aspectos, mas difícil como espaço expositivo, né? Então, mais uma vez, a gente teve que lidar com esse desafio. Para mim, foi, a princípio, o desafio de... a gente queria ter a casa presente, né? E, ao mesmo tempo, poder suprir as necessidades da obra, de algumas videoinstalações que precisam de ambientes mais escuros, que precisam de isolamento acústico. Então, isso era aparentemente, a princípio, uma contradição, e acho que, para mim, a grande coisa era deixar o Anri Sala vivenciar esse espaço e propor soluções, né? Para mim, foi muito mais assim, deixá-lo criar mesmo. E eu acho que, como não poderia deixar de ser, eu queria começar perguntando para ele sobre isso. Anri, as I told you, I would like to hear from you about the process to incorporate the house in the exhibition and about your first feeling when you arrived here about the house.
Well, the process of thinking about the exhibition was very connected also to the very first feeling when I came in the house. It's a very beautiful setting. It's a very special house. One still feels a lot that it's a domestic setting, but at the same time one feels that by now it is within a more institutional frame, and the institutional frame has somehow shaped also the way how the house is used in its second life. So my feeling was to maybe rebalance the things a little bit and use the work. Of course, use the invitation and use this beautiful house as a possibility and opportunity to show my work, but at the same time use this possibility to show my work as a way to display or to stage the house differently and a little bit more like it used to be before, like to produce something which is closer to the domestic and further from the institutional. And this is where our discussion started about how to produce possibly different and other trajectories about how people could come and visit the exhibition, and while they visit the exhibition they hop from one work to the other, therefore they're also hopping from one space to the other, and this hopping does not necessarily bring them in the same trajectory that they've been going in the past years, but maybe in other trajectories that possibly were used during the time when the house was a house.
We have here video installations and a lot of musicians. And I think it would be very nice to hear from you how the music became an important issue, important material for your work.
Well, in the very beginning, my work, I come from a background of painting and fresco and drawing, and then a little bit photography and then video. So music it was not one of the main elements in my work. But from the time that I started getting interested in using video as a tool, and one of my first and earlier works was a work which is shown now at the very end, towards the back of the house, in one of these annex rooms. I don't know how you call it here.
Pequena galeria.
Yeah, this is one of my very earliest works, but it's also a key work because it's a little bit like the beginning of many things in my work. So it continuously makes a comeback in my practice. And this is a work called Intervista, where language or the failure of language was very important. For the ones who haven't seen it yet in the exhibition, it's a work where I encountered, as I've moved away from Albania. I was a student in Paris, and upon one of my returns to my home country and visiting my parents, I found this in a box where they put all the things they thought they were mine. I found this reel of a 60mm film, which I took with me to find out what it was. And then back to my school in Paris, I played it back in one of the 60mm machines, and then I saw that it was an old interview of my mother when she was roughly younger than me today, and then one sees her in a concert of the communist youth, and also in a moment of encounter with the ruler of the country, like the leader of the communist regime, the one we call the dictator today. And there was no. So this was the beginning of my journey of a research, and there was no sound in it, like the sound was lost. So the only way for me to retrieve back at least the content of what the sound once spoke was to go to the school for the children with the listening impaired or deaf and mute. And this is where I could find what she had spoken once. And this is the moment when, as I confronted her to what she said once, and that was followed up by her surprise about how badly articulated she was. She didn't question as much the political content of what she said, because back then one could only say certain things in a very precise way, which was the accepted way of speaking, which was the official highway, and there was no way you could leave that highway. But still, she was very shocked to the lack of articulation for an articulated woman. And what we both came across to is the fact that how much the language has changed in the time of the transition since the 90s, and then you realize with the historical distance that you are given, you realize that the syntax of the language has changed, that one does not speak in the same way, and that back when it was a very stiff and a very tight way of in the architecture of language, how you could put words brick over brick to construct a meaning. And this made me very aware of that complexity of language, which is not as transparent as it seems, which is not just a matter of content, but behind that content, what is the architecture of it, which is the syntax. And the syntax very often, a lot of political, a hell of a lot of the authority is invested in the syntax. The moment that you control the syntax, you already control most of the content in that sense. So this is where I became interested in the failure of language as a means of communication. I became aware of its trickiness, but I also became aware of the syntax, and therefore I became interested in other ways of using other means of communication and working with their syntax, but means of communication which are not language. And this is how I came to sound and to music, because sound and music are other means of communication, but they are much more, they are not straight on, they are not as, they do not control as much the subjectivity of the other. They offer other ways, they are implicit, they are not explicit, they do not tell, they convey. And I'm interested in this, even in the exhibition. It's not about telling, it's not about putting the visitor in front of a work and then another work, but it's about conveying a proposal to see the space. So back to that's how I arrived to sound first, and then music instead of language.
you did 3 new works for this exhibition, especially related to the house. One not directly, like cat, no window, no cry, and bridges in the doldrums. I would like to talk a little bit about bridges. And it's a part of 14, now 15, I suppose, installations with the drums, that they call doll drums, made with drums, that you have been doing since 2008. And I think it would be interesting to hear you to talk about the relation of the title, doll drums, with the piece, and about your interest in sound as a physical phenomenon that is present in this series.
Particularly this series of works which use these snare drums that play by themselves, whether they are standing on the ground, fallen on the ground, or suspended from upside down from the ceiling. It's a desire to make sounds visible. And what they do, they act a little bit like visual speakers. Like instead of out of sound and out of sound frequencies, they produce a choreography of the drumsticks. In the case of it's true, like the beginning of it, the very beginning of it, actually it connects to a film which I did in 2006, I think, Anri, which is one of at the very end of the trajectory of the exhibition in the main house, where one can see a drum which is playing by itself, and actually it's playing by itself because it's reacting to the frequencies of a given space, which was a big geodesic dome by Buckminster Fuller, which has a very long frequency response, or in a more popular language, a very long echo and strong echo. And because of this echo, like it triggers the sound in the room, triggers makes the drum skin vibrate, as well as consequently it triggers the drumsticks to respond to the drum skin. In the case of the more sculptural work, which has its beginning in this film, is not longer the outside environment or the architecture that surrounds the drum that triggers the drumsticks to play, but is the sound within the drum. So they are triggered by this speaker that plays low frequency sounds which are not hearable to the ear, but which are nonetheless very much present there within the drum, and they affect the drum skin, and as a result the drum skin triggers the drumsticks. In the case of the work here, Bridges in the Doldrums, it's what it plays. It plays a composition or a rearrangement that existed first and had a very long process in the making, because it exists as a performance that I did for the Havana Biennial, and then I redeveloped it as a later on as a performance that I did in London, and it was a collaboration with a musician and friend based in Berlin, Andre Vida. And it consists of roughly like 25 minutes of sound, which are only made of bridges from pop music, like whether jazz, pop, reggaeton. It starts from the 40s and it goes all the way to a couple of years ago. And the way how they are set in this composition, we start from the slowest bridges, which happen to be jazz from the 40s, and then we go all the way gradually to the faster ones, which ends up with the Cuban reggaeton. And I'm very interested, which also connects a little bit to previous work. I'm very interested in bridges in pop songwriting, because bridges is a part of a song that works against the song. So it's if we conceive of a song that we like as a house, like as a place we feel completely at home because we know it and we feel good every time we listen to it, the bridge is the one that tries to open a window and let another sound come in. So technically speaking, a bridge either doubles or halves the speed of a song. It produces a rhythm and the music which is different from it, so it estranges the song from itself, and it's very strategically put between the verses, the last time we hear the verses, and the after we hear it, and just before we hear the last time the chorus. So once we arrive back to the chorus, we are like, home again, like we land back to home country. And this moment of alienation and the rupture in the song, it interests me because in my work I'm very interested in these moments of alienation and the rupture for different reasons, whether personal or political or social. And there it's pure musical phenomena that happens. So in this long performance, basically we hop from one bridge to another bridge. So it's like a continuous hopping in bridges of a piece which has an end because it's 25 minutes long, but it never arrives somewhere. If there is any sense of arrival, it happens only because some songs are so much more known than others. Like when we hear a David Bowie or a Madonna, it's much more known than a less known jazz song from the 40s or a Cuban reggaeton, like I said. Then the bridge of a very known song feels a bit like the verses or like the chorus when compared to the bridge of a less known song. So this is this kind of traveling in time and traveling in time signature of a piece that accelerates, and this is what the drums play. Now, there are 4 drums, and because the composition was arranged for 3 wind instruments, saxophone, trombone, and clarinet, each of the suspended drums embodies one of these instruments and plays to the frequencies of that instrument, while the fallen drum in the ground plays to the percussion. Yeah.
Bridge.
I say the British way. Bridge, like.
Okay.
Puente, yeah.
Yes, ponte.
Ponte.
Many of your films are shot in places that have a very complex historic background. No? In which sense you think that the speech, the narratives created around your work from this historical background that not necessarily is evident in the piece are related with the scenes you shot in these places? For instance, for you, is there some connection or relation between the history of Plaza de las Tres Culturas, Plaza Tlatelolco in Mexico, and the scene that you shot there? I mean, people playing. Should I say or should I go in that?
If there is a relation between the site and the idea of the film itself.
Yes, and the action in this case, or
yes,
between my curiosity, between the silence between the couple of Answer Me and the site that you not only thinking about the dome and the acoustic
yeah, but
characters,
the narrative itself,
the history of that place.
Yeah, I think in a way, like maybe I describe too much because I don't know to what extent you since we're doing the talk before the show exhibition opens, I don't know to what extent one has seen the work, so that's why I describe it a little bit. I don't know whether it's helpful or unproductive.
No, it's okay.
So, is it productive or? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, in both cases of the works that we say, actually, what I'm really interested, I mean, there are people in them, so there are characters, but the real characters are always the space. So to me, it's not about the films are. These films that we're speaking about, it's not about the people in the films, but it's about the space where they are inhabiting. In the case of Answer Me and the Dome, which used to be in Berlin, which used to be a NSA listening post to listen to the communication between Soviet Union and the Eastern Allies, or in the case of Tlatelolco site in Mexico, which is both, which was that's where they lay one of the biggest Aztec temple ruins. That's where was the last big battle between the Aztec and Cortés and the Spanish, and that's where was also the unfortunate massacre of the students just 1 week before the games, the Olympic Games. And speaking of Olympic Games,
1968.
in Mexico City. So in each case, it's about the space more than it's about the people that you see in the film. Now, why I say that? Because, for example, in the case of Answer Me, there is a couple, a drummer and a woman, and they are splitting. They are making the falling apart clear to each other, and this is based on a very little note of Antonioni that I read somewhere. It's an intention he had to do a film that he never did that film. It's just only one paragraph where he says that basically one day he would like to make a film where a couple is splitting, yet another couple in an Antonioni film. And he was interested not so much to why they are splitting and what they are saying to each other, but to the awkwardness of the silences in between the words. So he wanted to make a film about that awkwardness. And when I was in this space, which is where I shot Answer Me, the NSA listening post, which had been abandoned, therefore it was squatted, because of the amazing beauty of the place and the beauty of the ruin that it had become. And especially the loudness, because like I said, the Bakmosted geodesic dome, it has a very long reverberation and echo. I thought, what kind of story I could make happen here that is not about the story, but it's about the space. So I thought of this little note of Antonioni, but instead of concentrating on the awkwardness of the silences, I thought maybe I could produce an awkwardness of the loudness by using the reverberation in the film. So it was an attempt based on a very small sketch of somebody who does films with actors, taking that little paragraph and using it as a dialogue between two people. But at the end of the day, what silences that dialogue is not the silence, but is the loudness of the space, thanks to that acoustic feature that this dome has. When it comes to the Tlatelolco clash, first it starts with another film, Le Clash, which I shot in Bordeaux, but I was specifically interested in the Tlatelolco site in Mexico City because it's a site that not even if we speak only of architecture, we have the Aztec ruins, and then there is a Spanish church, Catholic church, made by the very stones that belong to the ruins. So they just stole the stones from here to put them there. Within the same site, and then there is the Pani architecture, this brutalist, very modern Mexican architecture, and then there was also the terrible earthquake. So there is also spaces which are not there anymore. So there are these four types of architecture, three of them that exist and one of them that does not exist anymore. And I was very interested in this discontinuity, because you only know the Mexican story and then you know what brought this architecture next to each other, but there is no continuity. There is no continuity necessary from the Aztec and from their temples into the Catholic, or there is no necessary continuity from the Catholic architecture into the brutal modernist architecture. And so I thought to stage this idea of people coming to play these bits of music from Should I Stay or Should I Go of the Clash in that place, because I took the music for barrel organ of this very famous punk song, and I cut it in parts. And so I put the barrel organ in the center of the site, and I just gave these parts to the people. And these parts were roughly 4 seconds long, and it was just like a piece of perforated paper. So it felt a little bit like they were coming to bring their voice or to bring their vote. It's a little bit like going to a polling station. You come, you put the thing, you play it, and you take the time you take. So some people are older or calmer, and the 4 seconds become 6, and some people are much more energetic and dynamic, or perhaps young, and the 4 seconds become 2 seconds. But they never come necessarily in the continuity of the song. So there is a rupture. In the same way there is this rupture in architecture, in the surrounding, there is a rupture in the Should I Stay or Should I Go, and this is so. I wanted to combine, to bring together a rupture of which I knew myself, which was the rupture of the song, to this more objective rupture, which is the shared rupture, which is a rupture of and the discontinuity of architecture in this very specific site in Mexico City. So this was, again, it was a lot about the space more than about the people themselves.
In some works, like 1,395 Days Without Head, that is a film that é um filme que a gente vai passar aqui no cinema, faz parte da exposição. Hoje vai ter uma projeção às 7h30 convido a todos para ver, mas de todo modo é um filme que todos os dias que a casa está aberta vai passar aqui ao meio-dia. In this film, in Long Sorrow, the actor to play music seems to have, in my opinion, in my feeling, an existential reason in a way, and as if the act of creation were a way to the characters keep alive or supporting the conditions, that specific conditions that their lives on that time. And could you comment this? For you, is it something important for you, or related with music in some way?
It is, in the sense that in 1395 Days, which is a film that deals with the siege of Sarajevo, where crossing the city was actually for 1,395 days, crossing the city was a matter of life and death. So it is something about like direct and objective existence. And while Long Sorrow, it's slightly more abstract and more conceptual, but nonetheless it's very real, because I invited a saxophone player I suspended him very high up in a very long building in Berlin. So he was suspended 80 meters above the ground, mathematically and scientifically very safe, but psychologically not necessary, because the moment you are suspended 80 meters above the ground, as much as you can believe in science and mathematics, it's really like being there it's a tougher one. And for him, the only way, and I wanted to put him in this condition because I wanted to work with a musician who was going to improvise. And it was very important for me to make sure that one concentrates so much in improvising, in inventing the next note or the next measure of notes, to the point of trying to forget his own condition. So yes, it was a little bit about trying to forget the condition where he found himself, having agreed, of course, which was suspending out there in a complete void, 80 meters above the ground. And the only way for him to forget and to somehow cocoon himself was to use the music as a way to survive the experience. So it's very different. One is based on a historical fact, and the other one is based more on an artist's idea, a concept, and wanting to give reality to that concept. But they have also another thing in common, is that both the main character in the film 1395 Days, who is going to her rehearsal and is crossing Sarajevo in one of these hundreds of days, she is going, and as in an attempt to forget her condition and to fight the fear, she's trying to hum and to remember her part in the orchestra. And so to hum means to use your breath, and to play saxophone is also to use your breath. So they both have this, and breath is again, it's a matter of existence. It's by the means by which we exist. So they do also have this common bridge, bond together.
Yes. This exhibition is going to, not exactly this one, because this is very specific, because the house, we are going to have another show actually of Anri Sala next year in São Paulo, in the new building of IMS Paulista. And there we are presenting a very big sound installation called The Present Day. This is the momento presente. Não, sorry, The Present Moment. O momento presente é o título da exposição, né? E então a gente aqui está. Esse título faz também uma citação a uma obra que vai estar sendo mostrada só lá em São Paulo. And I'm talking about the present day, the present moment, and in a way, it's true in this piece too, because there you are worried and you shot the effort of the musicians to play the music. Something that is in Long Sorrow and in the present moment too. Well, I think it's a good moment to open. If someone wants to do some question, be comfortable.
Eu vou fazer a pergunta em inglês, tá? Eu sou
Fica à vontade.
I'd like to ask you one or two things just about your working process, your thinking process. And while I ask this, I'm thinking of the work, the extraordinary work you did called Ravel Unravel. To what extent is, when you think through the process of making the work, how much of that is decided at the beginning, and how much of it will you decide as you're going along and physically working out the spaces? For example, there are always alternative decisions an artist can make at one point or another. And there's a decision you make to separate completely the films. And for someone who's going in for the first time, it can be reasonably confusing when you're in the second room where the music is coming from, if it's from the second room or if it's from the first room. How much of that is sorted out beforehand, and how much of it is sorted out in the first experiences of trying to make the work physical?
Thank you for the question, because I think process is indeed a very important part in my work. I'll make a very small introduction before I get to that. Why process is important is that I do a lot of research, and so there is a lot that goes into the process. And if I do this research, it's not to include all the outcome of that research in the work, but is to exclude it. So it's very important for me to advance by deduction, by taking away instead of by adding in, which maybe also gives to more recent work slightly this perception of being slightly less politic, because it's less direct or less explicit. But part of that project, of that process, besides taking away as much as I can from the work at the very end, is also to negotiate this cohabitation between an idea, which I want to turn into its own reality, but also what it takes for it to become a reality which can be shareable, which is not boring, which is not annoying, which is which can stand up to the idea itself. And this is something that I negotiate along the whole process, starting from the preparation, the writing process, so to say, the shooting, and also a lot the post-production, such as editing and mixing. But when it comes to the part of the question about how it's displayed in the space, this is something that very often I decide before. For example, the way how Ravel is split with Unravel was something that I decided even before I knew how each of the works would work on their own. So I knew the first time I showed it in Venice, I mean, I was representing France, but it was taking place in the German pavilion, and because of the way how that pavilion is partitioned in 3 parts, therefore I wanted a work which was made in 2 parts, of which one was split in 2 other parts, which is the beginning and the end of the, corresponding to the beginning and the end of the space. So that was a decision which was not, I knew it from the very beginning. So it's a combination between things that I know from the very beginning and things that I really don't know until the last moment, which most of the time this process just makes the idea better. I think somehow I could say that I use a little bit my ideas to give myself the possibility to become more knowledgeable and to emancipate myself in a way. Like I really believe that the works at the end are better than my ideas, hopefully, or at least. But this also happens because I'm very interested to advance without knowing. So I'm always less interested to work around things that I know how to deal with, and always more interested to work with things that I don't know yet how to deal with.
Just add one thing to that, just a personal curiosity. I noticed that in the first room, the soundproofing is so ostensive. I mean, it's very, very physically present because there are huge soundproofing panels. Mm-hmm. At any point, did this occur to you as a visual equivalence for or it was just a practical way of
No, it's 3 things. It's visual, practical, and conceptual. Because in the first part, which is Ravel, which corresponds with the anechoic room, the idea was to take this one concerto of Ravel written only for the left hand and orchestra. So there is the right hand missing. And to have it performed, filmed, and played back by two piano players, accompanied by each of them by their own orchestra. So all the time we hear all the notes twice. What changes is that they are not necessarily in sync. Sometimes they go out of sync, sometimes they come back to sync, and they go out of sync again. And this produces this space in between, which is the temporal lag between the one that is ahead and the other one that is lagging behind. And this temporal lag, which is continuously shrinking, I conceived it before, and that was a lot part of pre-arranging the work. So I worked with a mock-up, I worked with musicians, I constructed a musical model of it, which I was then able to play to the musicians so that they could prepare. And this shrinking or growing architecture, this was something which, to be heard, you need to hear that space in between. You have to be somewhere where you don't have any perception of space. And the only place where you can do it is an anechoic room. So anechoic room is the only place that, regardless of the size of the room, because of the way it's treated, we have no perception of space, because there is absolutely zero sound reflection, or close to zero sound reflection. So for me to be able to hear that space in between, which is the temporal lag, or being late or being ahead between the two pianists, it had to be heard back in a space where the space itself has no voice. So we can hear that space, the space in between. Therefore, for this, you have to give yourself the means to put these elements, like a bit like triangles. So this is both the conceptual part, why, but also the practical one is to be able that it does not remain a concept but becomes an experience for the others. And then and then of course I had to choose the size of it, which has a say in the acoustics of the piece, but also has a say in the aesthetics of it. And then I made a calculation of a size which fitted aesthetically to what I wanted to achieve. Like when one goes in a university where there may be an anechoic room or somewhere else, they do not have the size that I choose. They have other dimensions. While the other work, which was with the DJ, which is trying now to sync back the two piano players, I shot her in the main hall of the German pavilion, which is like a cathedral. It's like a very, very big echo. So therefore, whenever I show that film, I'm a little bit more loose in terms of the acoustic property of the room where it's shown, because anyway it was recorded in a space where there was a lot of reflection, of echo. So in a way, she was given by me an impossible task, because I asked the DJ, first of all I asked the DJ to do what a DJ is not supposed to do, to bring things together. A DJ splits things apart. So I asked her to bring things together, two things which are very difficult to bring together. Sometimes she makes it, but even when she made it, we still have the feeling that she's not making it, because it's the echo of the space that produces the sense that there are still something is still out of sync. But now, even when she's able to bring in sync the two pianists, they are no longer in sync with the reverberation of the space itself. Therefore, when I show this part, I don't need to have an amazingly acoustically treated room, but it can be a little bit more of a casual situation.
I just one more. So mais uma coisinha. When in Venice, you could see from there's a point where you can see the other pavilion in the film. But when it goes to the Museum of Contemporary Art, you're losing out on that a bit. That's just a part of the business.
Yeah, but there are many things that one loses, as long as one does not lose everything. But there are things that one loses, because already in this idea of representing, the whole idea of representing is already a complex question. Representing a country, and then representing France within the German pavilion. And then I left the door a little bit open, and you could see the name of the French pavilion. Of course, this is lost in the new museum. Another thing which is to some extent lost in the new museum, but again, it does not. The work does not necessarily need all its layers to be displayed. Was, for example, that something was very important for me conceptually is that that piece of Ravel in France is in the private domain. It's still in private domain, like in private hands. It's still like the income goes to private people. While in Germany, it's in the public domain. And now we are within European law, which is, so why do we have this out of syncness, which is not only the musical out of syncness that I worked with, but it's also a legal out of syncness. And in the book that I did, there is a text of a lawyer which speaks about, which is very interesting because the out of syncness, which is like 80 years of out of syncness, it comes because of the 2 world wars and about copyrights, how it was respected in places which were occupied by Nazi Germany. So this, but for me, the fact that I could show it in the German pavilion, it meant, which is German soil, German ground, not soil, but ground, it meant that I did not have to pay broadcasting rights, for example, which did not make any big financial thing at the end, but it's still, I like the fact that I could make use of this legal out of syncness between these 2 countries, which at the same time are the pillars of the European Union, no? So this is something that one loses in the new museum. But again, I think there are other things which are there to be shared.
I have another 100 questions, but I'll
No.
Hello. I feel that your work, definitely, it's very, very global, right? You shot in Berlin, you shot in Mexico, you shot pretty much everywhere. How do you feel that your national background impacts your work? Is that too broad?
I wouldn't speak of national background. I would speak of individual experience living,
Yeah, definitely.
being brought
But
in a country.
like the place where you were born, right? Because you were born in a very specific country as well. But we don't see many works that were shot in Albania, at least not here, in this exhibition.
Yes, I mean there are very few. I think there are 3 or 4 works that I've shot in Albania, and there is one in this exhibition. How it definitely does. Like I spoke a little bit before about rupture, the idea of rupture, the idea of discontinuity, and this is something that comes from my personal experience, having been brought in Albania. The fact that the system changed, that suddenly the system of values changed, suddenly what was good and what was bad, and the way how this was organized in the common sense. Even the common sense was, the idea of the common sense itself was questioned. So all this informs a lot my work, even if it's on a basis of unconsciousness. And so when I work with the bridges and the idea of the estrangement within a song, somehow it does have an echo into feeling estranged within a set values or within the common sense of a society that suddenly breaks apart or breaks its links with its former sense, and it's out there in the open, so to say, to find a new link with itself. So all these things do have left I believe a certain sensibility and interest that the pores of my skin are more open to these situations and to read the situation, to be interested in them, than other ones, like other artists are whose pores of the skins are open for other things. So definitely there is a link, regardless of the fact whether the works are being shot in Albania or not. Now there is also, like when I said it's not about the national, it's about the individual experience and the community where one is brought, is that, for example, I see this thing of being born in Albania, having lived in Paris, leaving Paris and then moving to Berlin. Like I did one of the works, Intervista, which it remains one of the key works of mine. It's like the beginning of it, so to say. I did it when I was in Paris, and I believe that I only did it because I was in Paris, because I had the right distance to be able to address that thing. So in that sense, for me, living in other countries is a bit like living in a stereo, like not being in a mono world, not having both feet in one place. And being able to be in another country also enables you to look back at your previous country in a different way, or appreciate it in a different way, as well as remain critical to the place where you are in a different way, just because you come from a different background.
Anri, I'm going to paraphrase you horribly here. You were talking earlier today about the architecture being the frame of sound, and one of the great pleasures of this show being that you have the kind of fluid trajectories and architectural spaces that are unpredictable and that don't repeat themselves, so that you're bringing work to these spaces allows you to, instead of having to reinvent them to make them interesting, because the spaces are so interesting themselves, you can go back to the pieces, to what they are in essence. But what I'm seeing, I think, increasingly in your work, and particularly with the doldrums piece here, is that works that start outside of architecture. So the doldrums, like in a park in Havana, and then a park in London, and a recording studio in Berlin, and then become something. Can you talk a little bit about how, for me at least, and I think for you, works that start outside the museum space or outside the confines or the frame, the kind of rigorous, boring frame of what we see as art world architecture, are becoming more and more enriching for you? They end up somewhere in a museum space, but they might be the Calder project, the Benesse project. The premise of the project increasingly looks like something beyond a museum, but when it eventually finds its way into an institution, they become more interesting. That's about 3 questions in one.
Well, I think specifically in this site, in this house, it's something which looks very different from the usual generic museum space, which is also, it makes it very gracious because in a way, here when I work in the exhibition, I know that I can also rely on the space, that I don't need to fill in everything, like I don't need to put all the words in the sentence, because the building will take care of the unsaid words, so to say, and that's part of the grace of this place. When you do something in a more like what we call the white box or black box, or in more like institutional space, then you have to say all the words yourself. So now this brings us back to the idea of the process. For example, a piece which is not related to architecture, which the first time it was made public, it was in a park in Havana, and then it was in a park in London. It was as a live performance, and it becomes a more sculptural piece. In the case of this exhibition, it was a piece that I have it in my mind, but I did it because I knew I would show it here for the very first time. So I don't know to what extent my answer is really answering the question, but to me it's very important to make site-specific exhibitions. So more and more I think not of what a work was and where it started from, but where it will arrive and what it will be in the moment of the encounter with the visitor. And this is this moment of being here and now, which is the moment when the subjectivity of the visitor encounters the subjectivity of the work. So I guess the more from outside that comes, I think the more it can enrich the inside institutional space. But at the very end, for me, what is really important is to produce situations that they are very specific to the place where the visitor and the work encounter themselves. Even if it is to some extent to undermine the site specificness of where the work comes from. And a very good example of that, for example, is La Cat, because it's a film which is simultaneously projected 3 times here at the same time, 3 screens. It's the same film, which I shot in Senegal, and it's about these 3 kids which are being asked by an adult to repeat certain words that I had chosen, and it's all words in Wolof about all the differences mainly in skin color from the darker to the clearer, but also light condition. And it's a language which is extremely rich in all these differences of shades. But then it has completely lost its ability to speak the primary color. So it doesn't have a word for green or yellow or blue or red. And there it's French who takes care of it, which is Senegal used to be a French colony. So this is it. That's the site specificness of it. It has to do with this place, which was a colony, and the relation to France being the colonizing power. But to me, that was very interesting to use this work as a tool and to bring it to other places which do have something to say about this colonial past. For example, here, the film is projected 3 times simultaneously next to each other, and each time is, one time it is translated in Brazilian Portuguese, another time in Angolan Portuguese, another time in Portuguese. And so somehow it does not, the film is no longer really trying to translate itself, but is starting to try to translate the context where it's shown. So this is for me where there is a moment where the site specificness, yeah, as well. Yeah. But to me, this is a moment where the site specificness of the arrival of the place where it encounters the visitor is more important than the site specificness of where it comes from. Because it really becomes like a tool to question where the film has landed instead of to question where the film comes from, which usually films do. Yes.
Eu só queria aproveitar e chamar a atenção para esse trabalho, que está num lugar que aqui a gente chama de gabinete, e que foi dos trabalhos assim que para mim foi um dos mais legais de trazer para a exposição, porque a gente fazia muito sentido trazer esse trabalho para o Brasil, pelos nuances raciais, né, por estar tratando de uma situação de colonização e de imperialismo de alguma maneira. E a gente, então ele fez, essa é uma versão feita também para a exposição, também para o público brasileiro, então a gente produziu essas 3 traduções para os 3 tipos de português, né, e que são mostrados simultaneamente. Então, vocês estando lá, vocês vão poder ver isso, assim, e o objetivo era buscar ao máximo como que seria possível falar aquilo no Brasil, né, aquilo que eles estão tentando, aquelas palavras no Brasil, em Portugal e na Angola. Obviamente, há muitas diferenças culturais, e o mais interessante é que a gente vê que algumas palavras são intraduzíveis, a gente sabe disso, né? Então tem muita relação com tudo isso que ele está nos falando, dessa descrença na linguagem.
Just one quick question for Anri. I mean, Anri has had an involvement with Brazil already. You participated in a Sao Paulo Biennale. You were here doing a workshop a year ago in Rio de Janeiro. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experience of the workshop, but also how a city like Rio de Janeiro, that on one hand has such a musical presence, no? There's so much rhythms present, but also it is a moment of political asynchrony, if it in some way is resonating within you, and in which ways?
Well, I haven't had really the chance this time, while I am here in Rio installing the show, to be out much of here and to encounter things for myself and to open myself. So a lot of information about the current life and politics in Brazil comes also because I'm interested. I'm a political being, so I read press, and of course this also depends on the subjectivity of the press or the journalist, but still that's where the information comes from. But it does have something which is a very interesting moment. It's maybe it's also a sad moment, but it's a key moment in Brazil, because, like you said, what is beautiful, like we all have a projection of Rio, which is a place of beauty, of joy, of rhythm, and it seems now to have gone a little bit offbeat. But the offbeat, you know, it's a little bit like when you touch bottom, then you can raise again, and you can find the beat again. So, and I'm always interested in these moments of offbeat, where you are somewhere in between the rhythm that you lost and the rhythm that the beat that you lost and the beat that you're about to find and to dance to. My experience with the workshop last year, which was with the architecture school.
Ele fez workshop no Minhocão, no Pedregulho ali entre a PUC aqui perto da gente, na Gávea, com uma turma foi organizado pela Ana Luísa Nobre, que é minha colega aqui do Instituto, que é professora também da PUC, e com um grupo de estudantes. Eles visitaram, enfim, a gente visitou, a gente caminhou em cima daquela revestimento acústico que tem num dos lados do túnel.
It was a very interesting. I mean, first it was a very interesting experience because I encountered students who were also very interested in things that do interest me, which is nothing very explicit, but it's yet quite political. They're interested in the city as a live thing. We choose to work on this building, which is a very known building, which is also very interesting for the ones who don't know it, because usually there is a road and then you make a building, and there is a building and you make a road through it. So there's this juxtaposition, and also this things are no longer in the right order, chronological order. Like it's not the road first and the building after, but it's the building first and the road after. But also what this means in terms of experience, in terms of urbanism, in terms of what sort of new shortcuts it creates in the city. These are things that do interest me. For example, in my knowledge during this workshop was that because of this road had to go through, and therefore to help a little bit the inhabitants with the effect of the noise of the traffic, they made this acoustic roof. But acoustic roof is something you can walk on, and we did walk on actually with the students, but which is also at times at the very end of this road, it's not very far away from favela, which means that the roof of the acoustic thing is very often used also for people to walk on it or to come to the building. So it just produces this unexpected shortcut within the city, which is not the planned shortcut of the highway, but it's also the completely unplanned shortcut, which is where the acoustic roof becomes a new way to connect to places. So these are things that do interest me, where things happen to things in a way that was not written before, where something changes in the script along the way. So I think this is something that both this, like when something changes in the script, and also the moment when the song loses its beat, but then one finds the offbeat of it. And I think this is where a moment when Brazil is right now, and where Rio is right now, which is a little bit like refusing to be our projection of Rio, like the tourist projection of Rio, but it's also busy with its own self and what it wants to be in its next step. And when I say Rio, maybe it's more like lapsus. I'm also speaking of Brazil.
Obrigada, gente.
Thank you.
Obrigada.